Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Telescopes.net. My name is Daniel Mouncey, aka Dr. D, and today I'm going to give you guys a brief overview on some accessories that beginners often use and some advanced users will use eventually down the line as they become more acquainted with the amateur astronomy and how to operate the telescopes and learn what objects are good to look at with filters. There's different types of filters. There's nebula filters and color filters. But I'll first begin by telling you that beginners often come into the store and they don't even know what they don't know, and that's perfectly fine. So we're going to help you know what you don't know. And one of the things that beginners will do is they'll sometimes start out with a small telescope, something like this, or a telescope like what you see here. And it's figuring out what kind of telescope to work with. We have several videos on that you can look at. The other option with a telescope is to purchase an eyepiece accessory kit like the one you see sitting here, which has several different focal length eyepieces to choose. It's kind of like having golf clubs in your bag where you choose a 9-iron or a driver. Same thing with eyepieces. It's switching out and determining what eyepiece helps the object look best. And that's what the purpose of having the different focal length eyepieces is there for. There's also color filters in the kit. These are planetary color filters. They're not expensive. The kits are very low cost and they're great. But in order for color filters to work, you have to see the features on planets to some reasonable degree first before the filters can accentuate them. And after that, there's also nebula filters, which are used for deep sky observation. There's the color filters, which you see here, and then you have like nebula filters, which tend to have these kind of mirror-like looking finish, and you can actually see a reflection of your own face in them. So there's several different options. There's broadbands, there's narrow bands, there's line filters. You're like, what is all this stuff? It's overwhelming and confusing. So we'll go into some more intricate details on each individual filter and tell you a little bit about what each one does to help you have a better understanding of it. But just try not to be overwhelmed with it, and we'll try to keep this as simple as possible. The thing is that when you buy these kits, or if you just buy color filters in general, they're planetary filters. They've been around for decades, for many years. As I stated, you need to see features on planets to some reasonable degree. For example, if I was looking at Mars, and Mars is a very finicky planet because it comes around only every other year, it often has dust storms in some of the oppositions, which is very disappointing because you wait all this time to be able to view Mars, and then all of a sudden it's got dust storms. And it's a very common thing to see. And not only that, Mars changes its angular diameter drastically because of its proximity relative to Earth and the way we see it at certain times. And this has drastic effects as to how it will look or how much surface detail you will see. Generally on Mars, red and blue filters are very common. And blue kind of help accentuate the polar ice caps. And like I said, you got to see them to some reasonable degree first before these will bring the details out on them. But typically blue works quite nicely on Mars. It's a very common filter to bring out the polar ice caps. And if you want to look at some of the darker Mare features, you can do like a number 23 or 21 orange or 23 orange red, or you have a number 25, which is red, deeper red. Now, some of the filters that you purchase have little instructions. You can Google them and find out what each color does, basically. But I have found that the red really helps accentuate the red, darker Mare features. And one of the ways you can do this, just for your own understanding of how they work, is to just look online, and you can see a picture or look at a book and come into a store like ours and look at a filter and just hold it over the planet and see what it does. And you kind of get this sense of effects on what's going on and what each filter is doing. So that's a really cool thing. You may also find out that you like no filters at all and you just want to look naturally at the planet and the way it is in its normal splendor. So I think as you go along, you'll find out each filter has its pluses and minuses. There's also nebula filters. I'm going to tell you a little bit about nebula filters. We have the broadband, we have the narrowband, okay, which is your UHC filter. We have your oxygen 3 filter, which is your line filter, and we also have an H beta filter, which is a line filter as well. And you can use one of these filters on one of these, you can use it on one of these if you like, or you can use it on one of these if you like. Doesn't matter. So you're probably confused as to which filter to get, and that's often the question that comes up. Just to simplify all this, generally, overall, if you have to live with one, go with the UHC filter. And I think if you speak to any amateur astronomers online, they'll probably tell you the same thing. There are several different brands that you can get. There's Lumicon, there's Astronomic, there's Orion, there's Optolong. all kinds of brands on these filters. They come in 1.25" and 2" sizes. So if you have, say, 1.25" barrels, the way that would work is you would just simply take it and screw it onto the bottom of your eyepiece like so, and then insert the whole thing into the focuser of the telescope. If you have a 2" filter, you have the option to use it with, say, a 2" eyepiece has a 2" barrel like this, and you screw the big 2" filter on there, and you're good to go. So what do you see with these things? Overall, the filters are designed to look at emission type nebula, and those are star clouds. So if you were looking at a photograph and you saw all those objects in there that had red colors, those are the kinds of objects, those ones that have red colors, that are enhanced by the use of some filters. Some look better on some objects versus others, and vice versa. You're going to find out that, like for example, the Veil Nebula, in some parts or regions of the Veil Nebula, it's a very popular object in Cygnus, that the UHC and O3 enhance features better in certain areas of it and in various type scopes. The North American Nebula, which is stunning in a small refractor, I highly recommend to see the North American Nebula. And it's not a common object people look at, but it's one of my top 10 favorite objects to look at of all time. I will use a 2" filter, and the UHC filter tends to bring that out the best, even more so than the Oxygen 3. Some nebula just respond differently. There's different frequencies that these nebulas come in generally that look a little different in each filter as you go along. The broadband filter can be used to look at galaxies if you want. They all generally tend to suppress stars. So just to kind of give you an idea of what happens here, you'll notice this little illustration, this photograph from my Backyard Astronomer's Guide from 1993. You can kind of see here what happens to an object if you don't have a filter, on there, and you can kind of see how the background is darkened by having a filter on there on the Orion Nebula. The only thing about the illustration that may not be as apparent is the stars. Typically, whenever you use a nebula filter, your stars tend to look dimmer. That's just the trade-off. But it's okay, because what you're really trying to do is bring out the nebula itself, the cloud, the star clouds themselves. They don't work on reflection nebulas. An example of a popular reflection nebula would be like M45, the Pleiades cluster in Taurus that comes out in the winter. That object in photographs, you'll see all this blue nebulosity around them. So these filters will have no effect whatsoever on reflection type nebula. It's always going to be emission type nebula that you look at. And as I stated before, galaxies, in some cases, you can get some enhancement with the broadband. Oxygen 3 filter works phenomenal in some of the big scopes. You can use all these filters in little scopes. If I take a small refractor like this one, for example, okay, this doesn't gather a lot of light. But what's important is that I get a wide field of view, I put the filter in there, and what I need is that space around it so I can differentiate between what the nebula is and what the background is. And having that ability to do that is what allows you to see that. If, for example, I had a telescope that was really big and I was restricting my fields of view, I would be inside the North American Nebula. I wouldn't see the whole thing. So it would be hard to tell what I'm seeing. And so you have to back out in some cases to see the entire nebula. Another one that you can consider is called the H-beta filter. California Nebula or the Horsehead Nebula. Lumicon called it the Horsehead filter. It's a popular name for it because a lot of people will buy this filter because they were so intrigued by the Horsehead they want to see it. The Horsehead is a very dim object. This is what it would look like, under like ideal conditions. It would be very faint. You can barely see it up here in a big telescope if I were to magnify it. And at less magnification in a bigger scope, you might see it look a little bit more enhanced there. But it's a very dim object in nature. And it's a lot of people have attempted to see it in various types of apertures and have an extremely hard time seeing it. So imagine you're buying a filter just to look at several objects. But people do it because they're so intrigued by the Horsehead. They've heard about it. They've seen it in books and everything. They're so fascinated with it, myself included. And I have seen the Horsehead on numerous occasions in various telescopes from 12.5 inches up to 20 inches. I even saw it in a night vision eyepieces called the Collins i3, and it looked ridiculous. We had a Schuler 12 nanometer hydrogen alpha filter in there, and it just shoots out at you like a photograph. It was an incredible, probably the most amazing view I've ever seen of it. But that's an entirely different thing. Nevertheless, there's only several objects that you can use the H-beta on. If you look at the Orion Nebula in some photographs, you'll notice that it has some reflective type nebulosity, and it also has some emission type nebulosity. That's the way you can see that is some of the colors. Some is red, some kind of show up blue or purple, things of that sort. and you'll find out that the filter can enhance. Once you become a more advanced observer, you start looking at intricate details more specifically, and that's where you start to notice what each one of these filters is doing for you. And that's a great level to get to. So we generally have these. There's also an interesting one called the Comet filter. It kind of enhances the greens. And what happens is that comets are very seldom we ever see comets come around. And there are literally millions of comets. The problem with them is they're like 20th magnitude. 20th magnitude is like ridiculous. Just to put this into perspective, even with a photographic rig on a telescope with sensitive CCDs for an amateur telescope, it would be very difficult to even pick up comets. They're so faint, and yet they're around us. And so once in a while, though, when they come closer to our solar system, inwards, in some cases the comet filter will work, in some cases it doesn't. So it just depends how the comets react to that filtration. So hopefully this gives you a general overview. Don't get overwhelmed with all the technical aspects and the numbers. If you have the ideal situation is to have 3 or 4 of the filters so you have a choice and you yourself can differentiate and determine what you think looks best on each one. Everybody has differences of opinions, etc. So hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. You can visit our website at telescopes.net, or you can call us toll free at 888-427-8766. Thanks for watching.